Hi there, welcome back to Colour With Me. If this is your first time, I hope you enjoy it. Before we get started, don't forget to download and print the picture from the link in the comments below. Today we'll be colouring these hot air balloons using water-soluble crayons. These crayons are great fun and we'll end up with a fantastic crayon painting at the end. Before we get started, you're going to need a glass of water and a paintbrush, some kitchen roll or an old cloth. I'll also be using this pencil holder as I use the crayons so much that most of them are tiny stubs. Step 1. I'm going to start with the largest of the balloons, using purple and pink for the balloon and a light and dark brown for the basket. I'm going to use the crayon to go around the edges of the outlines but not colour the centre of each shape. As the sun is shining from the bottom left hand corner of the picture, I'll be trying to make everything on the right hand side slightly darker to add shading and depth. Step 2. Take the paintbrush and dip it in the water. This is where your kitchen roll or cloth comes in handy. You don't want your brush to be too wet, so use the cloth to soak up any of the excess water. Now all we're going to do is use the paintbrush and wet the colour and carefully move it around to fill the space. It's okay if one side is darker than the rest, as this will give your picture shadow and depth. Step 3. In this step I'll be using a light and dark green to colour the hill in the foreground with the house on it. Starting with the dark green, I'm going to make a thickish line at the bottom of the picture, curving it round slightly on the left. Then, with the light green, I'm going to follow the fence line and go around the house, again making this quite thick. Before we add the water, I'll probably bring the dark green back and go around the house. Step 4. With a wet paintbrush, start to blend the dark green, moving it up towards the middle of the hill. Careful when going around the edges of other objects like the fence. Ideally, we don't want the colour to bleed into another part of the picture. It's best if your brush isn't too wet. It's easier to add more water as you need it. Once you're about halfway up with the dark green, with a clean brush, start to bring the lighter green down to meet it, mixing them in the middle. Keep adding water and mixing the two greens until you're happy with the result. Step 5. While that field dries, I'm going to move on to the ploughed field in the centre of the image. Using a light and dark brown, I'm going to alternate the colours, again just going around the edges of each section with the crayon. There will be more shadow where the field meets the sheep field as it dips away from the sun. You could try adding more crayon to these areas to darken down the colour and give the appearance of shadow. Again, carefully use the wet brush to blend the colours. Don't forget to use your cloth to soak off the excess water if the brush is too wet. Step 6. Now moving on to the field with the trees. I'll once again be using a light and dark green, using the darker shade around the bottom edge of the field and the lighter at the top. Try to avoid the tree canopies. It's okay to go over the trunks as we'll come back to them later. As you add the water this time, take your time to go around the trees as best you can. Again, we're going to draw the dark and light greens to the centre of the field and blend them together. Step 7. In the sheep field I'm using a dark turquoise and a light green, as I don't want all the fields in the foreground to be exactly the same. Using the darker colour I'll be going around the bottom edge of the field and the lighter colour at the top. Try very hard not to go over the sheep as we'll be leaving them white. With a damp brush we want to start blending the two greens together while avoiding the sheep. This could take some time. I meant to say that if your printer ink starts to run, don't worry, just try to blend it in with the colours. If it runs a lot you can go over the outlines with a black pen once the painting is dry. Step 8. Now we'll be adding details to the trees with a light green crayon. I'm going to colour the left hand side of each tree and the right hand side with a dark green. Then, carefully with a damp brush, wet each one and blend them together. Step 9. I'll be doing two things in this step. Firstly, the last cornfield on the horizon. Using the light brown and yellow, I'm going to curve the light brown slightly to give the impression of shape, but just use the yellow on the top line. With the brush, try to draw the yellow down into the light brown when mixing them. Yellow is so light it can become lost when mixing it with darker colours. Now I'm going to take the dark brown pencil and sharpen it with a pencil sharpener to get a finer point. Then I'm going to go over the fence and the tree trunks. As these details are so small, I won't be using water on them, otherwise they'll just end up as dirty brown splodges. Step 10. The house is quite tiny to be colouring with crayons, so I'd advise that you sharpen them to get a finer point. I'll use red for the roof and door and a dark grey for the house, only doing the lines of crayon on the right hand side. When you get to the grey on the house, pop a line under the roof as well and it'll give you a line of shadow. Finally, a very light blue for the window. When you add water, make sure your brush isn't too wet as the colours will bleed into the green of the field. Step 11. I'll be covering quite a lot in this step, starting with the sun. I'll make the sun orange and yellow with the orange at the bottom against the skyline. When blending the two, try to blend the yellow down into the orange. Moving on to the remaining balloons, try to make them as colourful as possible, and if you can, try to avoid using blue. When adding the crayon, try to add it more on the right hand side of the balloon and basket. This will create a shadow when adding the water. When you add the water, try to work from the right to the left, making the right hand side darker. Step 12. The sky. Using 3 shades of blue crayon, I'm going to put bands of blue across 3 places in the sky. To start with, using the darkest shade at the top. Make these bands quite wide, maybe 1 to 2 centimeters or an inch. With the mid blue, I'm going to put a band across the middle of the sky and have the light blue band at the bottom. can make your brush quite wet for this step. Starting at the top with quite even strokes, you want to start pulling the dark blue down towards the mid blue. Take your time and be careful when going around the clouds and balloons. As you get closer to the mid blue, you might want to start using that and pull some up towards the dark blue and mix them together, leaving some to start pulling that down towards the lightest blue. This stage is a lot of trial and error. Just keep going until you're happy with the result. Once all of the blues are mixed, you could try brushing up and down as well as across the page. And that's us finished. Thanks for joining in with Colour with me today. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out some of the other colouring videos on the channel. See you soon!